Good morning. It's June 22nd, 2020. Welcome to Quality Time with Koala Bear, Episode 2, The Thin Blue Line. The thin blue line is what the police call themselves, which separates anarchy and law and order. So we're going to continue our series dealing with the state of our union today. So if you haven't seen episode 1 or my introductory videos, I suggest going back and watching that before this. This sets up why I'm doing this, the purpose of it, and hopefully it'll be helpful to people out there to wade through the chaos. Again, these are just my opinions, but we're going to move forward. Episode 2, The Thin Blue Line. There's a tremendous amount of calling out there for defunding the police. From Black Lives Matter movement, Antifa, just people enraged and so forth. So I want to get into these issues of the police, the things that have been going on. I don't want to rehash what I've rehashed in the introductory video in episode 1, which is why I recommend you go watch that before this one. So there's a bunch of calls for defunding police, and that is really either people are venting their frustrations, which can be sometimes natural, or it's based on a belief of actually abolishing the police. And that will make, and they think that somehow that's going to make people safer. In a future video, I'll deal with the real underlying movement of that and how that's really nefarious. So it's really people's venting frustration, or they actually want to abolish the police. So we're going to start there. The hard, cold facts of American history in the major cities over a long, long period of time is the continuing economic and political disparity in the tribalistic neighborhoods of every city. And that's the core problem of what we're seeing today. This, no matter how you slice it, and yes, you can say pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and that's true in most cases. The part that I would agree with people in the minority community, and that is there is a systemic problem. I disagree that it's racism. I don't think it is. I think it's a much deeper problem that's gone on even before that, because I think we've overcome a lot of the racism, but it's the tribalism and the corruption in neighborhoods, how people just are either can cocoon themselves or they're kind of corralled into that. And there's a level of systemic corruption that happens generation after generation after generation that breeds a lot of this stuff that logically doesn't really need to be there, because we have the capacity in today's society to air all this stuff out. But it just keeps percolating up and up. So I'm going to delve into this, what I think. Real power exercised over its citizens is and has been done at the local and state levels. So this is not a political message. This is not about who's going to be president, or it's a president's fault, or right now I'm just focusing on where the real problems lie and where the solutions truly lie. They really reside at the local and state level, because that's where the power is most centrally located as it relates to how people feel about the police and whether or not it's being effective or not. If we were told to defund or abolish the police, there would be a vacuum, a natural vacuum that's going to be filled by something. And that's going to be filled by warlords, if you will, like in third world countries. And you can make a case today that is happening now in some precincts. You have this continuing of the gangs and the corruption, and then you throw in all other problems, that are part of this. So if you get rid of the police, there's going to be a vacuum, okay? And that is just natural with human behavior, and that vacuum is going to be filled with something. And history has shown us time and time again that it's never good. So if we're gonna define for some reason we tolerate horrific gang violence generation after generation after generation, and for some reason the political leadership elected every time keeps promising to fix local problems, but it really never fixes much of anything. They really don't. And we see that out in every major city in this country time and time and time again. And these problems that percolate just get bigger and bigger and bigger. So you have to look at yourself in the mirror and stop listening to Hollywood actors and athletes who can afford a private army to protect themselves, and start liberating yourself from systemic crime and corruption. Because that's really where it's at. And we get snowballed all the time. And I just advise people, don't fall into it. If you did once, don't do it anymore, because they don't have the answers. They're just standing around bitching while they're making millions of dollars. And you know what? God bless them for making that kind of money. But they don't have any solutions. They're just bitching. Okay? So the average person is a law-abiding citizen. The average person is. And the average person who is a cop is also law-abiding. The danger is in extreme elements of political control and manipulation from city aldermans to mayors, various bureaucracy heads and city councils, and even the police unions that support the corruption. And we've seen this time and time and time again. Okay? So I'm not saying that police unions as a block that they're all bad, because some unions are good. But we see a correlation between the corruption and the mishandling of the police and the police unions. There is a problem there, and people are going to have to come to terms with that, because just abolishing the police isn't going to solve the problem. Okay? You have a very deeper issue, and this is what I'm trying to get at here. The unions, some of the unions are good, but you have to look at how long the unions support the same political, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back scheme, while cities continue with high crime rates. We see this decade after decade after decade, generation after generation. And the average cop is beyond frustrated, okay, doing the toughest job on the planet. There's no tougher job than being a cop. You could make a valid case that a firefighter has the toughest job, but actually, it really is a cop. And I'm going to show you something here in a second. I want you to listen to something, and voicing the same passion. So if you just step back and you listen to a cop voicing the same passion as people protesting, I think we can begin to understand each other and to begin to solve problems. With that being said, let me show you and let me read to you something that I heard on June 6th, 2020 on the Armstrong and Getty radio show, which I usually listen to every morning before work. So on the Armstrong and Getty radio show, there was an email sent in to the show, and they read it out loud on the radio broadcast. Now, they withheld the name of the person. On the original email, the name of the person's on there and the department that he had worked for. So they actually did the right thing by withholding the name and withholding the department. So I'm going to read this to you because I think this is very important. This is part of what we need to be looking at. This is borrowed from a former local sheriff. Another one of the good ones saying what many of us feel. Quote, and I begin his words. I am deeply, profoundly sad that we aren't good enough. I'm willing to talk about my opinions and experiences. For many of my friends and family, I know that I'm not the only cop you know. First, some caveats. I can only speak for myself, not my department. I won't even be using my agency's name or the names of surrounding agencies because, frankly, they're not relevant. With a few notable exceptions, I haven't seen many people expressing opinions about specific agencies. Instead, I'm seeing a lot of generalities being applied to all cops. Second, I'm going to do my best to remain objective, but I have to be honest. It's a lot harder than usual right now not to get emotional. I've made it a point my entire career to remember that no matter how terrible the things that someone may be yelling at me are, they're talking to the badge and not me. But it's a little harder to not take it personally when it's some of your oldest friends calling you a murdering racist proxy. Okay, now this has got some salty language in it, just a little bit, but I think it's important, okay? Because his voice is every bit as important as the next person. But it's a little harder to not take it personally when it's some of your oldest friends calling you a murdering racist by proxy, especially when working buckets of overtime trying to keep a city from burning down, while also trying to make sure that some of the righteous message of the protest is heard. Because, of course, I believe in the underlying message. Most cops believe in that message. We swore an oath to that message, that everyone's life matters. And that is especially true for those who have the least and are the most vulnerable. That means that, yes, undoubtedly, Black lives matter. And most of us remember that oath, and most of us live it. No one hates bad cops more than good cops. This isn't 1933. Corruption isn't as rampant as it was. There isn't some grand nationwide conspiracy. There's just guys and gals trying to do the impossible job that y'all keep telling us to do. You keep sending us out there with more and more confusing mandates. You keep cutting our funding and asking why our training isn't better. You keep cutting mental health services and then asking why we, the only people who are absolutely required to respond to a call for help, are the ones to respond to a call for help for a mental health crisis. You keep letting people out of jail and then being surprised when that somehow doesn't lower crime. You keep telling us not to generate revenue by making traffic stops and then wonder why the roads are so dangerous. You keep calling us for problems that are objectively not police problems, and then being angry that we either A, cannot provide a solution, or B, provide a police solution. You keep insisting we be everything to everyone at all times, and to keep getting mad, and you keep getting mad at us when we are just merely human. So yes, let's talk about police reform, because I agree. We need it. We need to fund teams of crisis workers who can be called to deal with homelessness and related petty crime. Crimes of survival rather than convenience or malice. We need to fund mental health services and fix legislative loopholes and roadblocks so that we can provide help to those who need it. And we need to have a serious discussion about providing some of that help against their will. We need astoundingly better social services. We need many times the number of child welfare caseworkers and caring foster homes, and we need detailed, ongoing follow-up systems for every interaction. We need those systems to braid with schools at all levels, and while we're at it, we need to fund schools to a much, much greater degree. We need a parole and probation system that isn't just a gotcha program to incrementally jail people, and instead is a real opportunity for caseworkers to work collaboratively with convicts to better their lives. We need much, much less stick and much, much more carrot. And that's just scratching the surface of the things we need. But here's the thing. Police agencies are already critically understaffed. We don't have the personnel to do all the jobs you ask us to do. And you keep asking us to do jobs that we really aren't trained for, and most of us aren't temperamentally suited for. And you keep insisting that every single one of us, like some sort of factory-produced drone, can be equally good at all things you want us to do. That's ignoring basic human realities. To use just one analogy, a good school doesn't insist that the English teacher also teach chemistry, math, history, and orchestra, coach soccer and football, and run the AV club, and act as the nurse and entire cafeteria crew. And yet you keep insisting that street cops be medics and social workers and soldiers and detectives and counselors and therapists and surrogate parents and lawyers, and we can't. We just can't. So please take some of that away from us. Please find someone else to respond to the homeless man on the corner. Please find someone else to respond to the suicidal ex-soldier. Please find someone else to make the death notification to the parents of the teenager who just killed herself in a car crash on her way home from prom. Please find someone else to go check on a child who usually plays outside at this time of day, but you haven't seen since his dad got home slamming doors angry. Please find someone else to help his battered wife escape her relationship. Please find someone who's in a life of crime before he can even drive. I'm begging you, please. But until you do, we'll keep coming. Every time you call, we'll keep doing our best with the tools you've given us and the system you've built for us. We'll keep showing up because no one fucking else is required to. We are the only ones in our entire society who are duty-bound and sworn to show up when you call, no matter how little we want to, or how poorly we are trained for that situation. And I am deeply, profoundly sorry that we aren't good enough. I am heartbroken when one of us makes a fatal mistake or a catastrophic lapse in judgment. And I am ashamed to my core that some of us turned bad, or maybe always were bad and the rest of us didn't catch it in time. I wish we could be perfect. I desperately, painfully wish we could be everything you want us to be. But we're just human. And I know that isn't enough. So please work with us to improve the systems. The systems, plural, not just the police. We didn't underfund your schools, and we didn't shut down your mental health systems, and we didn't approve your shitty foster parents, and we didn't hand out those wildly disappropriate prison sentences, and we didn't crash the stock market, and we didn't sit on the college admission boards, and we didn't gerrymander your voting districts, and we didn't disenfranchise so many of you, and we didn't pass any of those drug laws. We're working in the system you built for us. We know it's broken. For fuck's sake, we probably know it's broken better than you. Yes, we have to do better. I know. Most of us do. Most of us want to. But so do you. Yes, you. We all do. And we have to do better together. Otherwise, we've wasted this. And all this passion, and all this energy, and all of this hate, and all of this destruction, and all of this terror, and all of this momentum, and all this bleak, bitter, poisonous, wonderful hope will be for nothing. None of us can afford that. Can afford for that to be the case. End quote. It's the end of the email. Those are his words. And I think it strikes true for a lot of people in uniform, whether it's a police officer or anybody who's serving in any capacity. So I'd like to go into the next phase of this. So what is the nature of American government, our republic? It's to do two basic things. One, to provide law and order so people can exercise their pursuit of happiness and be industrious to the way they see fit. And two, to provide the basic structure of services people want and need in their area. Very simplified, but I think that makes a valid point on that. Some of the possible solutions as a layperson, as I'm observing this through the lens of history and just learning things out there, and that is we need to be having real conversations that has to be long form, not screaming sound bites. And so referencing some podcasts that I've watched over the last year and a half, I've been learning quite a bit because I got kind of bored and tired of watching new sound bites, and I just felt like I wasn't learning very much. It was just the same old chatter, same old bitching and moaning back and forth, and nothing seemed like it was, I wasn't learning anything. So I've been listening. I use a baseline of Joe Rogan, his podcast, Joe Rogan Experience. But then I've also branched out from there. And a lot of these guys are, ex-military, people that are retired from the Special Forces and Navy SEALs, like Jocko Willink, Mike Ritland and his podcast, Mike Drop, Andy Stumpf and his podcast, Cleared Hot, The Sean Ryan Show with Sean Ryan, Free Range American from the Black Rifle Coffee Company. These are all guys who have been in combat. They're the tip of the spear. These guys, interview a lot from not only themselves and people who have come in and out of the community, people that, served in Vietnam, stories about World War II, stories about, Korea and the First World War, et cetera, people that have nothing to do with the military. There's a wide range of topics, and Joe Rogan is a good baseline for that. But I also kind of branched out and learn more. And I think that's always important to keep improving, keep learning, keep educating yourself. Doesn't have to be college, and especially in today's world. In 2020, man, you can learn so much more than ever really step in foot of a college classroom, and there's nothing wrong with that either. I'm just saying you can actually learn quite a bit. So I'm referencing these podcasts because I think some of the solutions are in some of the commentary that these guys have expressed. So number one is, let's ask ourselves if the cop today needs to be everyone's problem solver on every issue, is that better? And referencing the letter I just read to you, I don't think so. I think it is too much to put on every cop. Number two, listening to the Special Forces operators talk about their experiences and the selection process into their pipelines is these are their words, their terminology. The selection process into the various pipelines in special operations is a very long and painful process, and it's designed to be. It's not designed to be fun. It is, you volunteered for this, now we're going to crush you, okay? And there is this very systematic reason for that. Because what they ask of those soldiers is to do things that even the normal infantry doesn't do. All right? So these are the most highly sophisticated and qualified military personnel that we put out there when we send them to war. Okay? And I'm learning because I didn't get the opportunity to serve in the military. I was medically disqualified from going in, but I still like to learn. I still like to listen to people. One of the main things that a lot of the Navy SEALs talk about is, and Special Forces talk about in the Delta Force, and that is embrace the suck. Now, what's this got all to do with the police? I'll just follow him here with a minute, and I'll tell you why. Because I think part of what needs to happen is that there needs to be a better training system and so forth. And I'm not dogging the police departments and how they do that per se. I'm saying is we can always keep improving, improving the way that we do things. So what I'm talking about is the Navy SEALs embrace the suck. So it's a mental focus where everybody has to endure the same amount of pain and misery. And you can believe these people sign up for it. Sometimes it's hard to imagine when you actually listen to the stories, because they're not embellishing. They're all basically saying, look, we want to do right by the community, so we're not going to embellish what Hollywood does. We're going to tell you it's straight. So they embrace the suck. It's a mental focus for toughness so they can do the job that's required of them. So when you go through BUDS training, yeah, it sucks, but that when you graduate from that, you're not a SEAL. Okay? I didn't even know that. Okay? I didn't realize. I thought when you graduated BUDS that you were a SEAL. That's not true. That there is a selection process where you get assigned a team, and then your real training begins. Now, you may be assigned a team, but you're not part of the team. So the real training begins, and it's a very long, arduous, painful, miserable experience. So when you show up at those teams, you don't know anything. All you know how to do was just get through one small phase of suckiness, okay? And then the real misery begins, because these guys are going to train you for those specific teams to do the specific work that those teams are designed to do. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about Delta Force or Special Forces. I've listened to a lot of this stuff, and it pretty much cuts across the board. So before their teammate can trust you, you have to be skilled enough, okay? And so when they pin a trident on somebody, when you actually earn that trident, they pound that into you, and you're bloodied and bruised and everything else. So this is not a game. This is serious business, because they take their craft very seriously. Again, I'm going to show you the correlation with the police department. So with that said, Jocko Willink, a few days ago on Joe Rogan's podcast, was talking about that he points out that in the SEAL community that it is very typical that you're going to train for 18 solid months just for a 6-month deployment. So you have 18 months of training, every aspect, backwards and forwards, inside and out, just for a 6-month deployment. And he uses that as an example to say that, look, most police actually get minimal training. Okay, they may go through a police academy, and then they meet the minimal physical standards. They may meet the minimal standards in other areas, but for the most part, a lot of police departments just have the minimum training, and a lot of it has to do with budget funding and lack of prioritizing resources. So what he recommends is that 20% of the officer's time really needs to be dedicated. So 1/5, 20% of the officer's time need to be dedicated to training. And to even pull cops out of the field to train, and pull cops out of the field to decompress after incidents. That you're going to gain a lot more out of that person that you put into that position if you are constantly training at a very high level. Now, there's departments that train at a high level, but what he's saying is that it can get even more intense, and that you're going to have a better quality product at the end of that, and the ongoing training. The product meaning the police officer. Okay? Then there's a mental priority that you can only get. You can only get better by constant training, and that's true. I found that out in other areas of my life that I went through. That there's a mental priority, a mental toughness that comes from constant training, and being around the same group of guys or group of gals and so forth, and you're grinding it out, and you build a sense of camaraderie and trust, and there is quite a bit of that in the police departments. But what he's saying is that we can get even better. Okay. That psych eval programs need to be more than at the hiring point, and that they need to be periodic, because people get burnt out. Okay, we're dealing with human beings, and human beings will change over time, and so you have to have a constant evaluation. And he said, look, even SEALs don't even like to go through that, but they realize that it is important. There also, you have a counterinsurgency focus. So what his words are, a counterinsurgency focus as a police force. So what does he mean by that? So what I got out of that is that the insurgency is the criminal, is the gangs, is the all the kinds of horrible things that they see, and that the police need to approach things. He goes, just a suggestion. He goes, but right now there's a lot that's not working. And he says to have a counterinsurgency focus, and that the special forces have to build relationships overseas in order to be effective. Okay, you can't just go in guns blazing, at every time. There's a time and a place for that, but so much of the work that they actually do, is building relationships with the locals, like in Afghanistan or Iraq. It doesn't matter where they're at. Okay, they're building relationships overseas. Okay, so that the locals can actually take the fight to the enemy. That's the whole point of their missions. Okay. And yes, if they need to take the hammer to the enemy, yes, they will. But the primary focus is to focus on building relationships, okay, in order to be effective. And that politics and corruption actually gums up the works and gets more people killed. They see that even within the military. The politics and the corruption, whether it's direct or indirect, they see a whole lot of waste, fraud, and abuse, and they recognize that gums up the works that they were sent overseas to do. And so he said, look, it's a learning curve. You got to be able to learn about this stuff, and that you build relationships with the local population, and you get better at it the more that you do. And so he just highly recommends. He goes, I think we need to invest more in building the relationships, okay, with the local populations, the local neighborhoods, the local, who's living on this street and so forth, and you build up that relationship over time. Yes, the police have a job to do. Yes, they're on guard, but if you want effective policing, then you've got to be able to spend the time to really focus on those relationships. He also emphasizes a lot more on ride-alongs. And that the police departments need to offer that more to the public and do more community outreach and say, look, you need to see more of actually what we do and what we encounter, because there's so much that you don't see, and therefore there's a disconnect. He suggests actually getting 17, 18-year-olds to do ride-alongs, because they're at that point of high angst, of high capacity for just having so much energy that a lot of them do go the wrong way. Not everybody, but a lot of them can. But if you have a program that offers ride-alongs to young teenagers or teenagers about to be adults, and you can design that system, then you can get kids to understand what a cop is. The cop is not the enemy, okay? That the cop is actually there to provide an ability, a stability platform for you to actually build your life. All right? That's what the thin blue line is supposed to be about. Now, one of the things I'm going to bring up tomorrow is a suggestion by comedian Michael Jr. Okay? He's a Christian comedian, but he's got a tremendously tear-jerking story, but he also adds in the second video that there is something that we could try. He goes, it's worth trying. And that is to build into a police officer's yearly requirement to have at least 10 meals with people that you're patrolling in the hood. And whether it's the officer pays for it, the department, or whether the community pays for it, or there's kind of a 50-50 split or something like that, whatever they work out, to be actually sit down and break bread, to have a meal with somebody. And this goes right to the heart of what I was saying before about the 4 basic solutions in my introductory video. Okay, again, if you haven't seen it, go back and watch that. Breaking bread and having a meal with people. There's something about the actual point of eating with people that a lot of the barriers break down, and you begin to have a conversation. You begin to establish a relationship. So I think Michael Jr. is absolutely correct about that. I will be bringing that up in tomorrow's video. The next phase, Joe Rogan and Jocko Willink are also stating that every police officer should be a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. You have 2 years of training. By the time you get out on the street, and that you get a lot of experience getting your ass kicked and learning to control yourself and the scene that you're dealing with. Okay? Now, whether it's Muay Thai or Jiu-Jitsu or whatever the case is, they're just saying, okay, well, what would we prefer? We prefer, okay, Jiu-Jitsu. It is the one thing of all of the arts that would apply really to everybody's life, but specifically the police officer. And this isn't about beating people up. This is about understanding your position and to be able to control yourself even more. And that, yeah, if you get into a scrap, and it just gives you another tool that you can use to control the scene, to control the suspect, and so forth. They're saying that all of us are further removed from face-to-face communication today, and I think they're right about that. You have, just like an upside-down pyramid, at the top of the pyramid going down, so many people lose empathy and understanding for each other because of the mass social media. The next layer down is texting. The next layer down from that, it would be Zoom meetings or Skype. Down from that would be email and your crafting of your words. And then the next one down from that would be a phone call. And then the last one would be face-to-face. And they're saying that actually needs to be reversed. We need to spend more time face-to-face because you have better context. You have better understanding when you're dealing with face-to-face instead of the constant texting and social media being how everybody communicates. And then you're wondering why, you're misunderstood or you're offended or whatever the case is. All right? Things get blown up because of that. It's flipped upside down. And yes, it's the nature of the world we live in and technology, but this is what they're saying, and I think it makes a ton of sense. 6 is your leaders set the stage for the statistics and the facts on the ground. In Chicago, here's 3 slides, the three that I want to provide for you that gives you an idea that statistically over a long period of time, Chicago has an incredibly high rate of consistent crime. And the leaders of Chicago, just like any other major city, but Chicago is really the big enchilada here, okay? Consistently. The death rates, the murder rates, the robberies, and so forth. Consistently. This is what it's showing, all right? So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and kind of wrap it up here. And I'm going to use, I'm going to title this Calling for Superman or Calling for Superwoman. And this is something that I experienced that actually taught me something very valuable that I still use today. Several years ago when I went through, this is me talking here, okay? This is Brian. Several years ago when I went through a city firefighter academy when I was in college to become a firefighter, I had a great experience that I will never forget. Okay. One memorable lesson I learned was from a female captain who'd been on the job for 25 years. And she told us, she said, think of yourselves aspiring to be Superman, but you are not Superman, but you're aspiring to be, okay? And when the tones go off, and what a tone is, for those of you who don't know what that means, is when somebody calls 911 and a dispatcher is going to dispatch a specific engine company to a scene, medical or fire or whatever, they're going to send out a tone. And when those tones go off, it's like a great big bell or a klaxon going off. So when the tones go off, someone is having a bad day. All right? So she's teaching me this. All of us on the shift. Someone is having a bad day when that goes off. And when you don your turnouts, think of that as putting on your cape. And you get your ass on the engine ready to go to work. This is the mindset of a professional firefighter. Someone out there is having a bad day. So we damn well better have it in our heads, we're going to have our best day. It's not our emergency. It's their emergency. But we have to be calm, reassuring, and skilled to handle their bad day. The men and women on the fireground need to depend on you every time. That's the job, every shift. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. This episode number 2 is about the thin blue line. How we can better understand each other and begin to solve these problems. Thank you. God bless you.